Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. This is the time for questions and reflections, no pun intended, on the theme that we've been speaking about today. Do you want to go ahead? You're going to wait? Okay. So whoever has a question may put their hand up and come here and take the mic and speak to the mic. This is Jim.
I had a question about, you were saying there were the three: sensual desire, and then desiring to live in a heaven realm forever. And I had a question about that. And I wondered if that corresponds at all to, like, after I go on a long retreat, I feel a great purity of heart and mind. And it's almost like I dread that first major emotional upset that comes my way from going back to my life outside of those kind of spaces. Is that part of that longing to be in the heaven realm forever, kind of wanting to stay spiritually clean? Could you speak to that?
Thank you for that very good question. Actually, it's more true than you think that after a meditation retreat, a person could be overtaken by the craving for heaven. The samadhi or jhana is a state, it's called a divine abiding. And so a person who still has the desire for existence, when they obtain that blissful seclusion from negative states of mind in the meditation practice, if it's said in the early Buddhist texts that if they could sustain that and just remain in that pure state of mind, but not yet getting any insight knowledge, that it would be possible that they could be reborn in a heavenly realm. If one has got a basic understanding of karma, causation in terms of karma, if one straightens out one's morality, if one practices loving kindness, or what's called the Brahma Vihara, or the divine abidings, and develops them up to the level of meditation, and if they stop there, then it's almost like being in heaven. And if they were to pass away while they were in that state, they could be reborn in a heavenly realm. But as you also observed, when you then go out and encounter things in the world, that state, that condition is not very durable. And when you encounter the upsets and disappointments of life, then you may lose that condition. So when we practice sama samadhi, or right concentration, or the right stillness, whatever translation you use for sama samadhi, the deep meditation that's called for in our path of practice. If one is able to mindfully be aware that even this wonderful state of meditation is also conditioned, it's also impermanent, and because it's impermanent, it's not completely satisfactory. Even as blissful as it is, there's an aspect of dukkha in it because of impermanence, and therefore give up clinging to that state. And when you give up clinging to the wonderful states of meditation, then you have the opportunity for the awakening of the Dhamma and for coming towards the noble accomplishments. But if you cling to that state, then you would be in danger of clinging to heaven, or clinging to a heavenly existence. To put it in a different way, people who didn't know about Buddhism, who were practicing in a different faith tradition, they might have a very clear intuition about heaven. And it could be that their chief aspiration of their spiritual path is for heaven. And they have joy, joy, joy in their heart because they're living, practicing for heaven, aiming for heaven. They will be good. They will be kind. They will be generous and faithful. And they may be, praising God, or whatever the sublime essences that they believe in, and they want to be with that sublime essence in heaven. And if they live that way and practice that way, they may have that. There's no reason why they wouldn't be able to be reborn in heaven. But the Buddha said that's not leading to the end of dukkha, because heaven is still impermanent. So the eternal heavenly existence is something which cannot be had, because there is no such thing as an eternal, unchanging existence. And so then the suffering there is craving and longing for something that doesn't exist. This is not exactly true in the way it was explained in the commentary, the technical way. But I feel that people naturally want to have a position in life. They want to have a certain status, a certain niche that they would fit into. And if they might feel, if only they could get into that niche, that spot, that identity, that then they would be safe and happy. And this also doesn't work, because there's no niche or no place that's immune from impermanence. So, for example, when I was in college, I thought that, well, I wanted to get married. I thought if I were married, that then I would be happy. And when I came to be married, I mean, I'd heard of divorce, but I just assumed that my marriage would last forever. And not only would it last forever, but that I would always be happy with with that marriage. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. And but there's this longing for a position. So a child wants to be a teenager, and a teenager wants to be a grown up, and a grown up wants to be have a family. And somebody who's working wants to be retired. Somebody who's retired wants to get into a good nursing home. And so even like having the status of a bhikkhuni or our religious status, that there are many profound reasons why our life is conducive to happiness. But if we think it's because of the identity that I'm going to, get my certificate and my ID card, and then I'm going to be protected, no, it's not. That's not the way it is. So that's kind of another aspect of that craving for existence. But the one that we see more in the commentary is the craving for existence in an eternal heavenly realm. Yeah. Okay. I'll take Damon's question.
Thank you. And my question is related to the last question, that I reflect, I connect this with why it's good to renounce. Once I reflect why it's good to renounce heaven or becoming or a position or marriage or an ice cream, but it still feels unpleasant. The act of not having the ice cream when it's offered to me, the act of turning down a position, it feels unpleasant, even painful. When and why does it finally start to feel less unpleasant, even neutral, or even pleasant to renounce all those things?
So the renunciation means not clinging to anything. So even though we are not clinging to it, we might still have a husband or a wife. We might still have children. We might still have a position in life. We might still have our status as being a person with the citizenship and the race and the ethnicity that we have. So we can't erase all the experiences and qualities of life. The thing that we are erasing is the clinging and the identification. So then when that happens, it's pleasant indeed, because you lose all the anxiety. So you can you can have the experience of being, say, if you're a citizen of the United States, and and in some ways it's great, and in some ways it's really awful to be a citizen of the United States because of everything that we're responsible for. But because of not clinging and identification, then we've got a very sort of like a light relationship to that whole complex. And then whatever else about whatever status or position that we have in life, or even the things that come to us, whether the ice cream that comes to us, we can have actually a reality-based experience of the ice cream.
But we can't. It sounds like you're saying we can have our cake and eat it too. I mean, with the ice cream, we literally, at times we just have to painfully turn away from it, not cling to it, and and not have it at all if we're sensitive to dairy or things like that. And so it sounds like you're saying we can Oh, no, we can still have our cake and eat it too.
So when something like the ice cream is a trigger for greed, then to refrain from ice cream in order to simplify our life and reduce the occasions for greed to arise can be a smart choice to do. Even if we want the ice cream, we know that overcoming our addiction to ice cream is a much safer and more long-lasting kind of happiness than being addicted to ice cream and getting ice cream from time to time.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah. I was sort of verging over between that sensual craving and the craving for existence, which are actually two different kinds of craving. And we can see that maybe there's a different strategy towards your ethical choices or towards the care that you take when it's in the domain of sensual craving and when it's in the domain of the craving for existence. Patipada is asking me to expand on it. So it's very clear in so many of the teachings that the Buddha advises not to give in to craving. We're supposed to know the measure of food and take just enough food to get through the day, not as much as we want. That we should avoid the excitement of entertainment and gambling and shows and those things, and we should avoid things that are like soft and luxurious. And this is done, for the purpose of taming the tendency of craving. Although I will tell you that elsewhere, the Buddha said, Devadatta criticized the Buddha for sometimes going to a wealthy home and receiving fine, delicious food. Right? And so the Buddha has gone beyond craving, and so it doesn't hurt him. It doesn't trigger his greed if he goes to a wealthy home and has whatever food they give him in that place. And even in the realm of the personality type, when we are running the monastery, if we have one trainee who's got a greedy temperament, we would put them in the tent out in the yard or in some place that's, extremely humble and not comfortable and very plain, so that they don't have a chance to trigger their greed. But if you have a different person who comes along who has an aversive tendency, if they strongly tend to criticize and dislike and be dissatisfied, then we put them into a very comfortable room. It's not luxurious, but we put them in a room that's comfortable, that's beautiful, it has a nice view, it's very clean, everything is in good repair, so that then that overly critical mind that they have doesn't find objects to latch onto and to feed into the critical mind. See, so the approach towards sensual desire is different for different individuals, but there is a strong idea to not satisfy sensual desire in order to reduce that craving.
Into conditioning, perception, and all of that,
Mhm.
because we tend to attach value to certain things.
Conditioning, perception, and all of that, because we tend to attach value to those things.
Conditioned in a certain way and we develop opinions about how others should be like us. Because we think and value some of our attributes. And so when we see someone else reflecting our attributes, we can tend to approve of that person. And then we can tend to disapprove of someone who doesn't.
So when we're talking about sensual craving, it may be at a more subconscious or intuitive level than what we believe or what our ideas are, that the craving comes up, and then the craving might be dressed up with ideas. It might be dressed up with beliefs, but it's almost that it's coming from both the physical type that we have, and also from things that are not just at a more like basic part of our mentality, not so much the higher thinking. But as far as existence goes, I think our craving for existence does get into the higher thinking, and how we crave to how we identify and attach ourselves to having a certain position, or else that we imagine that there's some state that we could get to that would finally solve all the problems. And then putting all of our energy into reaching some goal which we think is going to cause the trouble to go away.
The labels that are coming up in my thinking process as you describe this is pride and conceit and really strong desire for position, importance, all
Yeah.
tied to the ego.
So all of that pride and conceit I associate with the bhavatana, the craving for existence. It's sort of part of a complex with that. It's true that as monastics, we have given up a lot of the aspects of hierarchy, and that we don't have a high social position. We're sort of like outside of the social hierarchy. We're not accumulating wealth and so forth that could be like the symbols of having a certain social status. But nevertheless, no matter how hard we try to get out of it, status still keeps like coming back. And then people look at the monastics as having a very special status. And when you're get first ordained as a seminary, even though you're only a child, and then your mother and your father bow down and touch your feet and bow down to you because you're a novice, and it says, wow, you've gotten this status as a monastic, which is revered and respected. And so it's very difficult to avoid having a status in society as much as we try. But that's why one has to continuously reflect about not clinging and not identifying with that. And so it's like with sensual desire, we can reduce our consumption in order to help to reduce the amount of triggering, to reduce the amount of craving that we have, to get out of the habit of satisfying every craving by consuming something. But then as far as status goes, it's very difficult to cut our status.
It's put upon you by
Yeah. Even if a monk wants to be a solitary monk, and they go and they find a cave somewhere that's far away from anybody, and they go and they sit there all by themselves to practice meditation, and then the next thing I know, there's 30 people coming around bringing the alms food because they heard that there's somebody's meditating, and so it is difficult to avoid and it requires the development of wisdom to get beyond that craving for existence. Okay, I'll call on Sheila.
Thank you, Aya. I think along those themes, and I hope I explain this correctly, in day-to-day life, in the work environment, interacting, I'm thinking that and approaching those who are holding on to their status and using status as their calling card, if you will, can be very troubling. And I'm seeking ways to, I think, be equanimous with that person's tendency, and not that and I want to ensure that I respond in a measured and in a way that reflects the practice. And so, is equanimity, or is there some other response, so to speak, that is a way to interact with individuals who have a strong need to exert their status and remind you of their status, and they're very identified with their status, and that is like the individual that you're interacting with, and being very mindful of how I interact with those sorts of individuals. Thank you.
Others may have a different answer. I would tend to feel compassion for how difficult it is for somebody that's that addicted to status, and how much suffering is involved with that. And then if I, visualize the wish for the conditions for anybody who has any kind of addiction to be able to emerge from that addiction. We can't force it to happen. And this is where equanimity comes along. So it's both a combination of compassion and equanimity. We have compassion because we see the suffering that arises from the choices that a person might make. And we have equanimity because we're not able to force them to make different choices. But then at the same time, you never know. It's possible that if we really are aware of the dukkha in that, it could be possible sometimes to be able to have an intuitive and skillful interaction that could open a doorway for somebody to see the possibility of giving up their addiction. Or even just being a model of a person who's not addicted. And, showing that very clearly that it could be an opportunity that somebody could pick up, but it's up to them whether they do or not.
When I encounter such people at work who are addicted to power, there's also a level of fear. I think that provokes fear in me, and I want to get over that, So I've gone job to job to job, and the pattern follows. It's gotten better, but still it is, I think fear is part of me. So, to not walk away, to be yeah, I guess I'm kind of asking. You said equanimous. To be equanimous is not to have fear, right?
Yes.
Or maybe you can talk.
Well, certainly, the true equanimity, the highest equanimity, is a state which is unshakable. And it's a state where one is not clinging to anything. So if you're not clinging to anything, then it's how could you be shaken up? It's like the sound waves, passing, they pass through the connections. So the wall is connected to the nail, and the nail is connected to the stud, and the stud is connected to the other wall. And when a noise happens on one side, it makes a vibration that vibrates through the wall and comes out the other side. But if there's a gap of space of air with no connection, then the sound stops transmitting. The vibration doesn't transmit. And so the same way, when a person finally, this is like our highest goal. So along the way, there is a certain sutta that it's very curious because it seems sort of like opposite of what's normally suggested. And the sutta is a reflection on one's sila, where we would think other people may kill, but I do not kill. Other people may tell lies, but I do not tell lies. Yeah. The effacement sutta. And so in that teaching, you basically are taking like your safety zone or your security zone, your strength is within your own sila, your own values. And you know that in the end, what determines your happiness for the rest of this life, as well as for the life to come, is based on your intention and your sila. So if you become so weak that you just give in to the flow of what other people are doing and become like them, then it's like giving in to a terrorist that they just keep taking more and more out of you. And so then you have to this way of taking a stand is finding one's security, in that case in terms of sila. Now there are more than one different qualities that a person could take that will be their safety zone or their security. A person who has done a lot of meritorious deeds in the past, if they've been, generous and just done good karmas, the merit that they've done is a kind of a safety blanket. It helps to protect them from the mind being infected by fear or infected by negativity. If a person has very clear and well-developed idea of their aspiration on their spiritual path, if they know this is what I'm aiming for, and it might be slightly different for different people. Some person might have a very clear vision of nibbana or a very clear vision of awakening, and a different person might have a very clear vision of the path, and they just want to stay on the path. But in any case, this is their sada. Well, it's their aspiration, their spiritual aspiration, the direction of their life. And that becomes a kind of a protection. So other things that happen, like whether they like you at the office, is not very relevant to that, so that you have that protection. Your confidence in the triple gem is also a protection, or your confidence in this path of practice that is a protection for you. Another lady I know used to work in a stressful job because of racism. She was, I guess, the only Asian person in the factory where she worked, and it seemed like people were, her bosses and colleagues were sort of tough on her. And she said, while she was driving to work, and as she was walking from the office to from the parking lot out into her office, she would be iti piso bhagava araham sambuddha. She would just get her mind stabilized in her confidence in the triple gem. And then when she had a break, the required 10-minute break or the 15-minute break at work, she would go outside the office again, outside to the parking lot, and so she was like really facing a lot of social stress and pressure, and she was choosing to use the confidence in the triple gem as a protection.
Say that if you experience hair raising fear, to think of me.
Yeah.
So, and if the fear doesn't go away, then think of the Dhamma. And if the Dhamma fear doesn't go away, then think of the Sangha. I don't need a camera. Yeah. Then think of the Sangha, that, the Itipiso and Swakato and Supatipanno. The Buddha said that if you experience fear, you can think of those things.
Yeah.
One of the things that I did, the things I went through at work.
So I don't have to repeat everything. Can we shut the mic?
I'm coming.
Let's pass the mic. You're still in the
So one of the things I found helpful in a situation where I was the only person of color in a division was I downloaded Dhamma books on Audible, and I listened to that day and night. I fell asleep with it, woke up with it, sat at my computer, worked with it, because when working in an environment that is hostile, you have to create what I saw as a protection around you. And you have to create that from within. Whatever comes out, I realize that whatever comes out of me interacts with everyone in that environment. So what could I emit that is positive? Well, listening to those books is what gave me a frame of mind to be able to be neutral and just receive what was coming, but not retaliate, not push back. If it was blatant and I had to take a stand on something, I will. But for many of what happened, the intimidation was neutralized by me knowing that it's just that individual and it's coming from within them. It's not mine. So I didn't claim it as mine. The story of the Buddha with the Brahmin who was shouting negativity at him, and he asked the story of the question of the Brahmin, do people come to your house and give you gifts? Do you have to accept those gifts? And he looked at the Brahmin and he says, thank you for your gift, but I don't accept your gifts. Please take your gifts and leave. And that is his story. That story has been my living example of how to work in a hostile environment.
There's another saying that I've heard is very powerful to get out of that sense of danger or vulnerability or reactivity. And that's the slogan is it's not personal. So when that knowledge really is integrated at a deeper level within our psychology and our way of thinking, then these social patterns that are filled with pain and stress and strife can just be seen as it's a fact of nature. Just the way nature causes hot days, hot weathers and cold weathers, and droughts and floods are all coming from nature. So the same way, hatred and prejudice and power struggles are things that are part of human nature that happens from time to time in the human condition. And it's not personal. Yeah, but on the other hand, we don't necessarily wish to continue to be born again and again, living in the world which is like that, with human psychology having such a mixture of different tendencies.
Because
when the phrase "it's not personal" is used, since everyone in the work environment is actually operating from a place of self and personal identity, it is personal, but it's personal to the person it's coming from, because it's coming from inside of them based on their values, their opinions, and their perspectives. But it doesn't have to be personal to me. It's when their words hook an emotion and a painful past memory. When it hooks that, then I make it personal about me. And so I've really observed this arising in me for quite some time. And I've been able to see the point where what someone is directing at me, I start twisting it and making it all about me, when it's absolutely not about me. It's about that person, because they are sharing their perspective based on their life experience and sharing their values. Has nothing to do with me. So in my meditation, I've really spent time observing the complexity of the steps involved in that kind of interaction, ending up with me feeling hurt. I hurt myself in the process, and that doesn't have to be the outcome. So this has been a really rich lesson for me.
So circling back to the theme that we started out this day about reflection, whatever we pick up, we do have the power to choose what we pick up, what kinds of thoughts, what kinds of intentions that we carry and want to manifest within ourselves, and that those can be ones that are conducive to our long-term happiness and welfare, that we do have the possibility to discover how to turn away from those patterns which are toxic and damaging to our own spiritual state and to our own long-term happiness. So the practice, this is one of the resolutions that we're trying to do for this whole 3 months of the Vasa, is to try to be more mindful, more aware, taking more care, and just thinking, well, what am I intending about this? Before, during, and after. And with that reflection, just bringing it up to the level of conscious awareness, then having a much more capacity then to make beneficial choices. Because if we're not aware, we're not able to make a good choice. And so I'd like to leave you with that thought and welcome everybody to come back to a final closing sit of meditation.